welcome to the Garden Like a Guru Show. And I'm your host, Tyhson, Banighen, a permaculture instructor. And we have Sarah Bradshaw here, the Garden Guru herself. And we're going to start the show off with what's up with planet Earth with all these new energies coming in. We just have the cross quarter and Beltane and a full moon. I don't know about you, but boy, that energy did smack me around a bit. Must have been wonderful in the garden, but I sure felt it. How about you, Sarah?
Yeah, it was kind of intense. We spring hit early and it hit hard this year, like the things are just taken off. And yeah, I'm really noticing that, we've got almost everywhere in the region, we've got dandelions in full bloom.
Yeah.
Coming back along the Okanagan corridor, I'm seeing the balsam root blooming, so that means arnica's just around the corner. So yeah, we've got a lot of things coming. I found that full moon was a real turning point. We're like fully into spring now, and it's full steam ahead. And we're coming to the last week of that particular moon's cycle as well. Here we hit that fourth and final quarter today, just shortly after noon, and we'll be having the new moon. The moon will be renewing itself shortly after Mother's Day. So this is kind of a week of pause and reflect, if you will. Now, the final quarter is rather tricky to plant in. The moon energy is waning. There's not that much influence. Tomorrow we slide out of Aquarius and into Pisces. And although normally Pisces is a really good sign to be planting in, unless what you're planting is actually driven by Pisces, which would be your leaf type vegetables, your above ground things, unless you're doing specifically those, you're not going to have the best of energies. So you could get away with planting, your spinach, transplanting your brassicas, any of your cabbages, broccoli. You could plant lettuce. You could plant leafy greens. You could transplant herbs. Last week we talked about planting potatoes, and potatoes are one thing that no matter how good the signs look like they're aligning, Pisces is not a good sign to plant potatoes in. When you look at the various components of what astrology does, each astrological sign governs or rules a body part. So Gemini, for instance, is arms. Pisces, it's feet. So if you plant your potatoes in Pisces, your potatoes will do what we refer to as growing toes, which means you will get nubbly, knobbly potatoes. And I'm sure that's happened to a few of you as gardeners. You dig the potatoes and you look at them and you go, what on earth? Why are they all gnarly and knobbly? I mean, I planted nice big round Yukon Golds and I got these bizarre looking critters. Well, if you planted them in Pisces, that is indeed what can happen, because they grow toes and you get all these tiny little potato buds and not really good potatoes for making French fries or some of the other things we like our potatoes to be able to do for us.
Oh, I never knew that, but that doesn't sound like fun.
So the Pisces energy is going to last us all the way through to early in the day on Friday. It's going to zoom us into Aries just a few minutes after midnight on Friday morning. And we're going to be in Aries right through to Mother's Day. And then Monday morning will be, or late on Mother's Day, we'll be going into Taurus. The day after, we're going to be not only in Taurus, we're going to be looking at that moon renewing itself. And so next week, we're going to have, again, skookum energy for planting. But for this week, take a time to pause and reflect, assess what you're doing. Just like look at what may need to go in, what you need to prepare. It's a good time to get the little things that we kind of push out of the way sometimes in the garden until it's a little too late. Like put up the teepee to plant your beans on right now. You don't have to get the beans in the ground this week to get the teepee built. If you build the teepee, then you know where you're going to plant your beans around it. Same with pea fence. Your peas, if you planted them a while back, they should be getting up to this point where they might need a little bit of support. So this might be the week to, put up your pea fences, make your row markers, build your bean teepees, get the little covers or overnight caps for your tomatoes all set up and ready to go. Do those kind of tasks in the garden this week to keep yourself connected, but take your focus off of the planting a little bit for this week. Take a pause, take a breather. Everything needs you need a break from everything. So there nothing in life is done day after day after day exactly the same way, and everything that you do, you need to give it a period of rest. So look at this as your week of rest from planting, and try not to let the urgency of the season push you forward a little too fast.
Sounds like good advice.
Yeah. Well, it's actually kind of fitting in with what we're going to be talking about in general today, because what we're going to be looking at is bioregional indicators and learning how to pay more and more attention to the natural rhythms of what goes on in your garden. Now, you can go and buy books from any bookstore, check them out of any library you like, and these books will give you unbelievably accurate information on planting zones, how many days of frost free that you have in a given region, how many hours of sunlight are on average in the various months of the year in your region. You can get a whole wealth of information in these gardening books that is 100% accurate, but which in the long run may not benefit you as much in your particular garden as you are hoping it will. Um, right now, I am getting really flooded with questions from people from all the way down to the Delta Surrey area of southern coastal BC, all the way up to Fort McMurray, which is in the northeastern corner of Alberta. And the questions are all basically the same. Can I put my tomatoes out in the greenhouse yet? Can I put my things out in the garden at night? Am I going to have to cover things? And when these are in public discussion groups so that these questions come up, I will frequently see responses like, we wait till the long May weekend to plant our garden. Well, we find that, you've got to, that June 2nd is the magic date for getting watermelon in the ground. And, people throw dates around, or, the long May weekend or shortly after Easter. And the reality of it is that even if you know the zone, even if you know the number of frost-free days that you have in your garden and the hours of sunlight that, Environment Canada says your area gets, this does not give you an accurate picture of how to address planting your particular garden in your particular yard. That is something that even in a zone is going to provide an amazing amount of variety. Like Tyson, you are what, 20-minute drive away from me? Half an hour, maybe,
Make how
at the
long?
most? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So, yeah, yeah. So you're on right on the shore of Shuswap Lake, a fair ways up the lake. So you're actually a little further north than I am. And most people go, oh, you're further north, it's going to be chiller. But it's not necessarily. You're a ways north of me, you're on the lake. Now, if I look at a elevation map or a gardening zone map, those maps are likely to put you and I in exactly um, if you those will have us in exactly the same planting zone. You will be told that, yep, you're in zone 5, and I will be told that, yep, I'm in zone 5. And if I travel down to Cherryville, which is about a 2-hour journey from where I'm currently living to the south, it's in exactly the same bioregion of the Shuswap watershed. And garden zone wise, it also is in zone 5. But I go to your place last week to plant potatoes and brassicas, and the fruit trees are so heavily in blossom that we are standing under a living web of bees that is buzzing and humming when we are filming. We are dodging the bumblebees that are feasting on the dandelions so that we don't step on them. Everything's in full bloom. Your garden's absolutely rocking that. I make that 20-minute, half-hour drive home and up the hill to my place. And here we are a week later, and those exact same species and varieties of trees are only now beginning to bloom. In Cherryville, they're starting to bud. They're not beginning to bloom yet, but they are swelling, and we're seeing them on, getting ready to open. So here we have 3 different areas that are in the same bioregion. They're in the same theoretical gardening zone. They have the same number of frost-free days pretty much if you look up any almanac. And yet, your garden is easily 2 weeks ahead of mine and 3 weeks beyond anything that I'm going to have going in Cherryville. And the same will be happening at the end of the season. I will be experiencing frost while you will still be having days where things can be growing and ripening, and your tomatoes can be doing just great, whereas I'm going to be bringing mine in to finish off ripening. So far more important than looking at those charts that tell you your zone, or going by traditional things that have been brought from elsewhere, you need to get very, very, very familiar with your own particular little microclimate. Now, in your yard, you've got the lake a stone's throw away. That's a huge mitigating factor, to have an open body of water that keeps the temperature much, much warmer in the spring and into the fall, and really mitigates a lot of it. The other thing for you is, due to that lake and where your piece of property is, you have a long, long, long south facing exposure, which gives you in this area absolute maximum sunshine and exposure to the warmth. And you're going to find that that makes all the difference in the world in extending your season. So if we're not going to look at a calendar and go, oh, I'm going to plant on the long May weekend, how do we do it? So this year in our Wise Woman Seed calendar, our planting guide calendar, we have 3 pages that are specifically devoted to bioregional or to bioregional indicators. Now, when I moved to Seminar and I was a teenager, and I found the very first fall that everybody knew the minute knew the minute we got on the school bus the morning that we saw snow up in the very upper reaches of Mount Ida. Everybody on the school bus was eager to let us know that there's snow on the tip of Mount Ida. We're going to have snow in the valley in about 6 weeks. And as long as I've lived in the Shuswap region, that has held to be true. You know, when I moved to the bench on Armstrong and was gardening there, I had a man in the neighborhood say to me, "You see that little patch of snow up there on that rock bluff?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "Don't try and plant anything, that needs it warm at night until that patch of snow is gone. It'll just, it just won't go well." Well, what day is that going to disappear? It's going to be a different time each year. So, talking to the old timers, finding out those kinds of local things is a really crucial step in this. And then learning your own little bioregional indicators. Like I tell people all the time that when the chickadees start ordering cheeseburgers in the springtime, it's time to start opening up your greenhouse and getting the garden prepped. Because all winter long, we barely hear the chickadees. They're in the background going dee 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 dee. And then all of a sudden, one spring morning, you come out and you hear dee 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 dee. It's like, wow, it was years ago somebody said that called it the cheeseburger bird. And, it was like, yeah, it does sound like they're saying cheeseburger. So, I tell people when the chickadees are ordering cheeseburgers, you know that spring is coming and you got to start doing those spring tasks. But yeah. Oh, well, if you'd put March up, then I can walk people through some of them because indeed the very first one in March is that bit of information about the chickadees. Yes, oh, absolutely. Yes, we have fabulous gardening charts and information for the course. They really really help you get things sort of narrowed down. So, you know, um, in our region, um, we have migratory swans. So, when we start seeing the swans all along the Shuswap River, people know that's definitely time for them to start getting their greenhouses warmed up and ready at night. When your chickadees are ordering cheeseburgers, prune your raspberry canes and your fruit trees. Get those done that early in the year. Right now, I'm eating both nettles and dandelion and have been for a couple of weeks. So I know that it's perfectly safe to plant my lettuce. Um, Daffodils in Tyson's yard are pretty much finished blooming, and we have gotten the peas planted there during that time window, and they're up and doing just fine. But if the daffodils are blooming in your particular area, it's warm enough to be planting peas. Now, the arnica flowers are starting to appear, and we transplanted the brassicas last week. Um, so now we've got, things are really starting to bloom. We're starting to see that, we've got dandelions in full bloom. Well, now you can start planting almost any of your greens, any of your herbs that need to go outside. I noticed the other day the strawberries were blooming, so yeah, I'm gonna go hunting morels.
Wow,
Yeah,
yummers.
yeah, because that's the indicator, and that was something that I learned Years ago, hunting morels, you'd be out and people would be, well, how do you know the right time? How do you know the right time? And by the second or third season, I had put together that if the wild strawberries are in bloom, the morels are going to be coming out of the ground in that region. So you can just follow the elevations up till you see strawberries in bloom. If these ones aren't blooming yet, start going back down the mountain slope looking for your morels. So yeah, we have these seasonal indicators. They're going to stand you in much better stead than just days on a calendar, which vary radically from year to year. As we've been like going through these various things, um, we've been talking about um, the importance of the moon cycles and the full moon and the new moon and working with that. Well, that changes from year to year to year. And anybody who tries to follow the Chinese New Year, the Lunar New Year cycle, understands that that new year starts anywhere from mid-January to late February, depending on the year. So when you look at the variations of the moon cycles, the variation of the zodiacal influences and then these little bioregional indicators, this is what gets you into that class of gardener who hits success year after year after year. This is the kind of knowledge that takes away the question in the garden greenhouse or garden center. You're standing there with that plant and looking at the tag and going, could I put the money into this? Would it grow in my garden? What tomato plant should I plant? Um, Tomatoes, when you look at most planting guides and that, they'll tell you that tomatoes take 100 days from seed to fruit production. But that's really a ballpark figure. And so when I have people in Cherryville or people who are in an area where even though they're zone 5, even though they're the same bioregion as me, I know that they're going to have more of a chance of a late frost, um, more of a chance of a late season frost, much more of a chance of an early season frost in late August or early September. So I'm going to suggest to somebody in that area that they plant a Lata, which is an early tomato, or one of my favorites, the violet jasper, tiny. Between a cherry tomato and a paste tomato, it's a nice plum size, fabulous taste. Comes on early. It's often the first tomato we're eating out of the garden. Rapreco, which is a very old paste tomato that got developed largely on the prairies. So again, a fairly fast developer. The Manitoba tomato, the name kind of says it all. If you can grow it in Manitoba, you can be pretty sure you'll get it to full ripeness here in the Shuswap. Silver fir tree, which comes on so rapidly that I've had people grow it with success in sheltered and good conditions in the Fort McMurray region of northeastern Alberta. So there are tomatoes that are ripe in 75 to 80 days as opposed to that 100. But then I also have ones like my Graham Longkeeper or Keeping Tom, and they're 120, 130. The Keeping Tom is actually closer to 140 days than 100 days, which means I'm harvesting it and putting it in my winter storage quite unripe. But it's also the tomato that I will be eating on my tomato sandwiches in January when, no other tomato has come close to surviving. So knowing those little bioregional differences between your garden and what the general gardening area book says is what makes so much of a difference. Now,
Maybe
Tyson,
I should say just a little bit about a bioregion so people understand what a bioregion is.
yes, do Tyson.
All right, so um, a bioregion is just a watershed of watersheds. So think about if you hold up your hands, and this is the watershed. The water's all running down from the top of the mountain into the valley, right? And when you go to the top of the ridge of that, all of the water is running this way. When you get to the top of the ridge there, the water is running that way. So it's a watershed of watersheds, which is the crest of the mountains gives the rim of the bowl or the cup, and then that's your bioregion. And so it has its own unique climatic zone, which is uniquely different than the other side of the mountain, right? Because it could be in shade or it's north or south or east or west. So each bioregion is a unique system with its own plant material and its own animal kingdom as well that inhabits that area. So the Shuswap is a distinct bioregion. For example, compared to the Okanagan, we have more moisture, more green vegetation than the hotter, drier climate, which is to the south of us, which is down into the Okanagan region, right? So
Yeah,
each one is different.
very different. And the Okanagan Valley is old ocean floor bed. It is, it was underwater. It was a sea that and it and Kamloops and a lot of the interior was. But the Shuswap bioregion prior to that draining was actually a coastal region, and it's now considered a landlocked coastal rainforest. It once was on the coast and is not anymore, and that's reflected in the cedar that we see
Right.
in Shuswap bioregion, the Devil's Club. These are plants that don't exist within that Okanagan bioregion. And I feel it's really important that people have an understanding of their watershed and how that affects the Shuswap bioregion, the Shuswap River, which dumps into Maple Lake and then on into Mara and Shuswap Lake. Is part of the Fraser River water basin. It is part of this huge region, and it's a sub-region of it. When you cross the ridge and you're now between Enderby and Armstrong, there's a creek called Fortune Creek, and Fortune Creek flows into the Shuswap watershed, and it's sort of the southern reach
Right.
of that Shuswap watershed. When you cross that next ridge, you're in the Okanagan, and that's part of the Columbia Basin. And, so you have these very distinct differences in terms of what's going on. And the region of the Shuswap, is much more than a clump. It's like a strip
Yeah.
of a bioregion that runs beautifully along the highlands, much up out of that water that a lot of the province was under. Yeah, it gives us a window for planting certain things that really do well with the cooler and the higher moisture. Cherries,
Yes.
for instance, are a Shuswap crop. They're growing them in the Okanagan, but they have to keep climbing up the sides of the mountains in the Okanagan to get cool enough nights and that to get a good cherry crop. But Salmon Arm, when I was a child, every July we had the cherry jubilee because cherries were the crop of the Shuswap. And I think the name Cherryville kind of says it all for the other chunk of the Shuswap that I.
Absolutely. And where
Yeah,
we're down there, they have peaches, right? Which are a little more difficult for us to grow up this way, right?
yeah, and yeah, we for the most part lack those really hot
Yeah.
long nights that are required for nectarines and peaches. But we're seeing more and more that the grape industry, the grape potential is much broader than some of our other fruit crops. And so there's a lot of advantages to this particular region, and the fact that you can grow a wider variety of decorative plants that require little or no watering in this region, I think is an absolute boon. I drive through the city of Vernon and I see people putting in pyramid cedars as their decorative hedge. And I just want to cry because cedars are an absolute water hog. And here you are in a semi desert with,
Right.
sandy soil and 40-degree temperatures. And you're going to be pouring enough water on that cedar to grow yourself 3 gardens of watermelon and tomatoes.
Right. And then that would be a good thing to grow with watermelons and tomatoes and melons, right? Because it's a
Yeah.
great climate for that.
Yeah, it's a fabulous climate for that. So, Tyson, are your lilacs blooming yet?
Yes, they are. Not all of them, but I noticed the ones that's southern facing by the deck, which wants to grow up where the clematis is just starting to bloom. The buds are opening up.
So now we can start in your garden. And Michael was saying he did this. He planted more corn and squash directly into the garden bed. We're going to be able to start doing some of those early beans. Now, as those lilacs bloom and begin to fade, by the time those lilacs are faded and are coming off, you should have your garden pretty much fully planted. As those blooms fade and we bid goodbye to my favorite flower of all time, which
I
is the
love them.
lilac.
All the butterflies
Me
that
too.
come.
Oh, I love them. And so as they start to fade away, you know that it's warm enough for even your eggplant and peppers to be planted out. So, time that properly. We're getting into blooming, get the beans and squash in, get the corn in, get those warmer season beans that like it a little bit warmer, get them in, transplant out the brassicas, get the tomatoes out there, and right towards the end of that life of the lilac bloom is when you're going to be able to put in your peppers and your eggplants if you're planting them outside. Um, Now, um, the full moon in May is is a turning point here in a lot of the farms. If we're coming up to we've got a new moon coming. The full moon in May this year is going to be fairly late into the month. And when that happens, the farmers here in the Shuswap and even the North Okanagan hit one of those magical years where they can usually get 3 full hay crops off of their field. So, because the full moon lands, in the second last week of May, then we have this chance of not having any rain afterwards. We've got about a week and a half there, where farmers can get that first crop of hay off before the 7th, 8th of June, before that new moon in June. Then usually they can manage to get 3 full crops off of their field. That early crop can really be a fabulous money maker. And during those years where the farmers tend to get 3 crops of hay off of their fields, those are the years where you have to be prepared for absolute bumper crops of your above ground plants. Okay, your peas are going to really produce this year. Your beans are going to really produce this year. Make sure you've given your squash lots of room to grow because we've got a stellar year coming up. And because we've got such a nice jump on spring, this could be a wonderful year for corn as well. If you haven't got corn selected and ready to go in the ground yet, look around, see where you might be able to plant even enough of a corn patch that you can just have a feed or two and save some seed for next year. But this should be an absolutely stellar year for corn as well. So, I, you know, I think that helping people become aware of working with the biorhythms. Once we get into the heavier end of learning in the course about biodynamics and the various things that we can do to supercharge these energies, to invite the elemental energies more favorably into the garden. All these little things that right now are just the baby steps,
Yeah.
they're incredibly important. They really are. We often want to jump to the wonderful and the dramatic, but just like learning to walk, if we don't do the baby steps, I actually had a friend whose child tried to start running before he could walk. We'd put him down on his feet and he'd just be going and he'd make like about a step and a half and he'd wipe right out. And she spent like 3 weeks literally, grabbing this kid every 2 or 3 seconds when he was trying to do this and saying, I wish he'd just slow down and like just one step is what we need here. Just like, we need stability here. He's just not getting it. And he wrestled with this for about a week before he went back to inching his way around the coffee table and, going from furniture to furniture. And we laughed about, Alexander's like, early walking attempts that had his mother literally fearing for his life in
Right, right.
situations. So yeah, baby steps are really, really important. And if we look at like using the various moon signs, the various phases of the moon, we're slowly kind of layering in all of this information and this understanding of your various rhythms in your garden is vitally important.
And all of that's in the calendar, right?
Yeah.
And the calendar is available at $33 a month, which is the Garden Circle. And if you head over to the Wellness Academy and just put in the search engine garden, every single interview that I've ever done, including the garden like a guru show, plus how to do farm and gardening with Patrick McManaway, who was head of the British Dowsing Society. Really an amazing course is there as well. So lots and lots of information, and you will also find the Garden Circle at $33, which includes being able to order the seeds, right? And you also get a discount, I think, in the calendar and the journal at that level. And at the $99 a month, you get that thrown in and sent to you for free, and I think a reduction in your seed order as well, plus consultations with you, right?
Yes. Yes. And the garden charts that we send out with the course are laminated, so they do you for years and years. They're not going to disappear on you. Well, they might, but but they're not going to fall apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the consultation time is really quite important. It often just takes 5 or 10 minutes of bouncing around an idea or getting the right information to allow you to sort of move forward with the things that the decisions you need to make. So yeah, in June of our calendar year, this year's calendar, is another month that is completely dedicated to these bioregional indicators. And those ones actually, they'll bring us right into the height of summer because that's when this calendar page will be up. But because these bioregional indicators, they aren't just important in terms of planting your garden. They're actually really, really important to keep in mind as the entire season unfolds. A lot of people don't really know when they should dig potatoes. And potatoes are, there's early season potatoes, there's late season potatoes. There's potatoes that you can harvest partway through the year and allowed to keep growing. But you don't know what those indicators are. You can end up missing the prime harvest time. So knowing that when your potato flowers are dying and falling off, that you can dig your early potatoes is a really good thing to know.
Absolutely.
But then also knowing that if you've got a late season potato, you actually want to wait with those ones until the tops are actually dying back and going
Right.
brown, that they need that extra period of time. Um, in the garlic world, the garlic scapes come out and they're nice and circular. They look really lovely. They're these gorgeous, gorgeous spirals. And the first indication that your garlic is ready to harvest is when they're now standing straight up.
Mm-hmm.
So if you learn these little indicators within your garden, you'll get more of a fluid kind of interaction going on. Um, One of the things I encourage with people is that as their garden year progresses, instead of like harvesting things out of their garden and putting that bed, to sleep for the season, look at what you can maybe use it for into the fall. So, as your beautiful mock orange blossoms are starting to, drop those blossoms that they produce that are so lovely, as those blossoms are falling off, you know that that's a really good time for you to plant cabbage or broccoli or cauliflower so that you can have those tender, the broccoli and cauliflower especially does well
Right.
in that you get lovely young tender cauliflower and broccoli in the all through the fall, planting it at that point in time. And also because the heat of summer has been hitting that garden, your chances of getting the kind of cabbage worm infestations that your brassicas can get in the early summer are much less. Those little green worms do not like that hot sunlight. They just don't do well. And in actual honesty, most of the cabbage worm moths have died by that point of the summer anyway. They've kind of done their thing, and they've laid eggs that are going to hatch out next year, or they've gotten to the point where they've cocooned somewhere. So planting your fall season brassicas, around the time that your mock oranges have quit blooming. These are later season indicators, but like I said, for our calendar, we really want to carry you through the entire um, season. Um, One of my favorites is that when you see the Canada geese starting to group up and do their long little test flights that they do as they're getting ready to migrate, that's the time you need to start checking your corn and seeing how ready it is.
Wow. Yummy. Yummy.
Yeah.
I'd like to put a little plug in for this too, which is the calendar, which is the actual date book, because you really want to have a record about when you did plant and what you did plant. And it also allows you to, oh, when did I do that? And then, oh yeah, I need to have another set of, radishes in 14 days, or another set of peas, so you can stagger them out. And this will tell you the exact time if you take the time to note in here when you did do the planting. And also it gives you all the information about whether what you're supposed to be doing, or what's a good time to do whatever you want to do in the garden. Is it a leaf day, or is it a root day, or whatever day? So I really, really like this. I'm really getting to fall in love with it. It's up by my desk and I use it every single day, right?
Yes. um, I'm really glad you're finding it useful. When I designed the garden journal, I wanted to make sure that there was ample room for people to keep their own notes. So even though each day of the year has the moon location, the various astrological signs, other information like where the sun is, what days the sun zodiac changes, Um, I've tried to make all of those things like very, very readable and relatable and easy to use. But I also wanted to make sure that people had time, had space to record all of those various things that we do on a daily basis. I've been looking at expanding the journal. We're actually thinking very seriously of in the next couple of weeks putting out a call for submissions to the journal, because now that you've had a chance to muck around with it and play with it a little bit, I'm sure you've noticed that the front and back are just packed with all sorts of interesting little tidbits. There's this particular one has information that might change a bit from year to year, so that we have different articles and are focusing on different things. Although I'm pretty sure I'll keep the coloring collage section and maybe even expand it. So if people out there, are interested, if they're an artist, if they're an author, if they've got, little things that they feel they would like to see included in the journal, or directions that they would like to see it change, I'm really encouraging feedback. The calendar is in its fifth year. I saw the need for that quite a few years ago and have been really gratified to see the response. This is only the second year we've done the date book journal. And I really have to say that it is really a labor of love for me. It really calls to my heart. I'm a bibliophile myself, and I'm a journal keeper. So, I kept those things in mind when designing it. But really, if you keep a journal, if you keep a documentation of your garden, and you go back over it over the years, you'll just be amazed at what you've learned, at what you've added, at what you've done over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I have garden journals from a group in California. I can't remember in the moment on the top of my head, but it was a famous gardener. And it's a collective journal, right? That everybody wrote in. And it is packed with so much information. It's just amazing. And people are drawing pictures in it and everything. So it can be extremely useful to follow through, but also just full of wisdom. And in this particular garden, they had, from what I can remember of it in California, is they laid the garden out and the library to match. So what you would find in the garden layout, you'd find in the library. So you could go look at the plant and then get the plant information in the library in the same section. So the library was a carbon copy of the garden.
How
I
lovely.
thought that was
That
amazing.
that is wonderful. Yeah, like this is an annual journal that's very specific, it gives you the information very year specific. But I have always kept a generic garden journal from year to year to year to year, where I record things, and I've taken it from place to place to place. And it's wonderful to go back over it. And I think you probably have experienced that with what you're talking too. I go back over my garden journal and I look at, where I lived 20 years ago and what I planted, or, maybe I'm going back up to that area and I'm going to visit, and I'll take out the little map that I drew and I'll go back to that old garden. And, I have ex landlords and,
Yeah.
people who bought property that I lived on that know me, that, there's a place in Salmon Arm where I lived for a couple of years, and the man who bought it after me continues to give me permission to come and dig up little clumps of perennials because I started them, back in 1995. So we're looking at developing more of a perpetual garden journal, which will
Yes,
go by.
yes, yes.
So
I'm
January,
excited
yeah.
because there's a 10-year one that comes from Lee Valley, and I haven't been that good at maintaining it, but what little I have is exciting because you'll see exactly on that day what you did in the garden, wherever you were on that day. and you get this comparison, and it has room to do your garden layout in the front. Like that's Sarah's rough notes from, and I just happened to find that kicking around in the greenhouse, and I was so excited. That's her plan
Yeah.
last year, right? And it's got dates and all where she did the peas, and it's just full of information to look at. Wow, what did we have there last year? Because you don't want to plant the
Yeah.
same thing in the same place.
It's an absolute wealth of information, and a journal just kind of keeps it all nicely, in one place. And I'm an awful clutterer when it comes to papers and that, and I'll draw pictures and do plans and that, and then if I've got a journal to tuck them into, I do so much better. I've actually envisioned this journal with like a pocket at the beginning of each month so that you could put inserts in that. And we did get a question that from Banighen in Vernon about planting brassicas when the mock orange blossoms drop. They can be planted from seed at that point in time. You can grow them up as bedding plants and plant them as baby bedding plants if you like. But when I'm talking about planting brassicas in the mid to late summer for fall harvest, I mean by seed. They won't take any time at all to pop up in that nice warm ground.
Great question. So for your next garden journal, I really encourage to be able to have a place to do my garden map, right?
Yeah. Yes, we're envisioning doing, like I said, a perpetual journal that would not be just like specific to one year,
Right.
and that would have blank spaces for maps, for drawing things out, charts for you to places where you could record, when you got things started in this year and how that differs from other years. Also, the other thing that we'd like to really include in that perpetual journal is sort of a month by month breakdown of what kind of activities can be going on in the gardening world, so that somebody really new to gardening could actually pick up this journal and use it as a combination workbook, personal journal for their garden, and hit some really good measures of success.
Oh, I like that. That's a great idea.
Yeah. So
Well, that's Louis the dog who wants to participate in the Garden Like a Group show.
yeah. Well, you want to take into account everybody's needs in a garden.
That's right. Like stop weeding and planting and throw that ball.
Yeah. And if we can go back just a little bit to the concept and understanding of bioregions, I'd really like to encourage people this time of the year, when you're selecting plants to plant in the garden, and not just the garden ones, but this is the time of year people are hitting garden centers and they're purchasing trees and shrubbery, or they're doing landscaping in their yard. And I'd like to put in a really, really strong plea for using indigenous plants as much as possible, plants that are from your own particular bioregion. They will make a huge difference in your garden. They will do far, far better than things that you have to baby and coax along. And long term, you'll find you use an awful lot less water and resources. There's even a landscaping approach called xeriscaping, which relies very, very heavily on native plants, and really allows you to design a garden and yard that, after the very first year of you planting and keeping things alive, you literally don't have to water it. And yet you'll have an absolutely lovely place to hang out and enjoy the outdoors. So, getting to understand your bioregion and getting to understand why I would plant a wonderful juniper outside of Tyson's door. But if I was helping my friend Dawn in Vernon choose a plant to plant outside of her place, I'd probably lean more in the direction of a mugo pine, or perhaps even sagebrush kind of things, so that she's maximizing the things in her region and not trying to get something to grow where it just quite frankly isn't going to do well unless you provide it all the extras that are missing out of the habitat.
Yeah, really good information. Really important.
Yeah, well, that's what we've done with tomatoes is we took a tropical perennial, the tomato, and brought it up to a colder zone, and we grow it in a limited way, but we actually provide the environment that allows the tomato to grow and produce fruit. If you just threw tomato seeds out in your garden early in March and walked away, you'd get some growth, but you wouldn't get tomatoes. So, that you can grow things out of their bioregion, but to do that, you have to provide them with what they need. Whereas if you plant things in your yard that thrive in your bioregion, all you ever have to do is walk past them and tell them how beautiful they are.
Yeah, and they just wave back at you.
Yep.
I mean, I have been in a greenhouse, in a lean-to greenhouse in Oregon where they grew bananas of all things, right? So you can do some pretty marvelous things, but like you said, it's a lot of work, and you got to create the climate that banana's used to, right? Or it's not going to be happy.
And I can justify that when I'm growing food that I eat on a daily basis. I wouldn't go to that extent for a banana, but I go to that extent for tomatoes and peppers and and other warm loving things. But to go to that amount of effort to create a lovely space outside for you to enjoy, it actually detracts, I think, from the enjoyment. Whereas if you choose things that once you get them going, they just grow and look great and don't need a lot from you, you'll enjoy your yard far, far more.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about wisteria climbing up, pergolas and things like that. It just brings back happy memories of other wisterias and other pergolas, right? There's some things that are just part of our almost DNA or childhood, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't take any real effort on your
No,
part. You can just enjoy it,
yeah, just enjoy it.
as will birds and bees and butterflies.
And humans are trying to learn that. And don't forget your garden needs a hammock.
Yeah, your garden needs a rest space.
Right.
Self-care. Maybe next week we should talk about self-care for gardeners for at least part of the time.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, Sarah used to serve tea in the garden, so I think that's something that's really worth encouraging, right? And I noticed that from the last party, the tables are still in the orchard. And I think, well, I'm just going to take some chairs down there, leave the tables there, so you have a permanent little place to take your lunch out there in the summer in the shade,
Why
and
not?
lunch, right? And it's all set up to go, right? So
Why
make,
not?
make it human friendly to be in the garden.
Yeah, yeah. Gardens, like life, should not be all work and no play.
That's right.
Should not. They should be at least 50% play.
Yeah, we haven't got that one down yet.
Well, the tables for the tea and brownies is an awfully good start,
Absolutely, we're getting there, right?
Yeah, yeah. Now we just need the tea and brownies,
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Oh, Tyson, I can't believe our hour has trundled by so quickly yet again.
Yeah, it was a great show, and thank you very much. That's bioregional planting according to what's happening in your garden makes so much more sense than trying to do it by days on a calendar, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so that's a wrap. Same time, same place next week, and we'll continue the journey through the year so you can apply this in your garden and you can become the garden guru.
Yeah, come join us in the garden circle. Man, we have so much fun out in the gardens. We really do.
That's right, and the videos are awesome.
Yeah, we even have dogs in them.
And barking and chasing balls and doing all sorts of things. So join us. You too can join Us in Sarah's garden, okay? In the
Yep.
shoe. All right, bye for now.
Bye-bye.